The Apex of Training and Development Show is the region's newest talk show. We strive to redefine the true meaning of training in different work environments. Tune in every Thursday night at 8 p.m. on CTV Channel 2 and on our Facebook page at The Apex of Training and Development Show. On tonight's episode, we'll be discussing customer service and conflict management with Shawn, Maile, Human Resource Specialist.
Welcome to the Apex of Training and Development. I'm your host, Charian Casimir. Conflict in the workplace is often inevitable, especially when employees of different backgrounds and with different work ethics come together. Conflict can and should be managed in order to minimize interpersonal issues, enhance customer service, and to improve business outcomes. On today's episode of the Apex of Training and Development, I'll be speaking with Mr. Shawn Maile, a human resource specialist with over 15 years experience. Mr. Maile is the creator, connector, and curator of all things HR related. We'll be discussing customer service and conflict management in the work environment. Mr. Maile, welcome to the Apex, and we're honored to have you.
Thank you so much, and I'm delighted to be here as well, Sherry.
Mr. Maile, tell us about your journey as a human resource specialist.
Oh, most definitely. It was a journey that I would say is about 15 years in the making. It started when I did my first degree in psychology back in 2006. And then after coming back home and working for a while, I did a short course at the Antigua and Barbuda Investment Authority in human resource management. And that kind of fueled my passion some more to get more involved in HR. And I did a certification in 2015, and since the last year and a half I've been working as a labor relations officer at Antigua and Barbuda Employers Federation. So I really get to rub shoulders with a lot of HR managers on a day-to-day basis, hear their questions, comments, concerns about what's happening in the industry. And it's quite interesting because no 2 days are the same, and no two people are the same in terms of giving advice and hearing their concerns. So it's very multi-dimensional working in HR. You always have something to keep you on your toes, so to speak.
What is the most rewarding aspect of your job as an HR specialist, or I should say a labor relations officer?
I think the most rewarding part is knowing that you've helped someone with an issue and that they come out on the other side and that they've learned something from the situation and they now become an advocate for doing things the right way and the best way. I think that's the most rewarding part of it.
Okay, I particularly like the fact that you mentioned the human resource aspect of things.
Definitely.
How would you rate the customer service experience in Antigua and Barbuda?
That's a very
based
interesting
on your
question.
experience, of
based
course.
on my experience, I would say we are doing a stellar job when it comes to our customer service brand on the tourism side. Everyone knows Antigua is a destination for sun, sea, and sand. You come here to unplug, relax, and have some fun. On the non-tourism related side, in terms of just doing business on a day-to-day basis here in Antigua, I would say there's some pluses on the personal services side. You go to your barber, your hair salon, you get good customer service from these persons because they really thrive on your business. On the other end, where you go to some establishments, I won't call any names, things don't go quite as well as they should, especially in situations where there's a monopoly situation, like this place is the only place you can get this good, this product or this service. There might be some instances where the customer service is lacking. So on the branding side for a tourism product, I think we're great. On the personal services side, I think we're good. And I think on the non-personal services side, in certain other entities, I think there is definitely some room for improvement.
What can be done to improve the non-personal side of the customer service?
I think it comes down to realizing that no matter what industry you're in, you have a customer service element built into your organization. So whether you're selling cell phones or whether you're selling homes, whether you're selling cars, whether you're selling, insurance, it all comes down to you have to be able to sell it to someone. You have to market your good, your service, your product to someone. So there has to be that level of customer service. And I think once you realize that no matter what organization it is, there is a customer service element, and you feed that element by promoting training and development for your staff and your co-workers, your colleagues, whatever the case is. I think once you realize that and you push content that way, that you would do well.
We're going to take a break, Mr. Maile, and when we return, we're going to delve into the aspect of conflict management in the work environment. We'll be right back after these messages.
On the Apex of Training and Development Show's Tip of the Week 9, we have Laurie Lord.
Hi, I'm Laurie Lord, President of the Human Resource Professionals of Antigua and Barbuda. Our tip this week is to remind you that you can't pour from an empty cup. While we're busy meeting organizational goals and helping those around us, take time this week to relax, reflect and rejuvenate so that we're better equipped to be more productive and to help those around us even more. Thank you very much. Have a productive week.
Don't forget to like, comment, and share for more content, and follow the Apex of Training and Development Show's Facebook page. Stay locked in to find out who will be in next week's Tip of the Week. This episode of the Apex of Training and Development Show was brought to you by the following sponsors.
Thank you for staying locked into the Apex of Training and Development. We're here with Mr. Shawn Maile. I'm your host, Shawn Casimir. Before the break, we mentioned we'll be delving into the aspect of conflict management in the work environment, which is a rather controversial topic. Mr. Maile, how would you describe conflict management?
Conflict resolution, conflict management, I think it's something that is always going to be trending in the workplace. And I say that because conflict inherently is not a bad thing, right? We experience conflict on a daily basis, internally within ourselves, externally in the workplace. Even driving on the road, you might experience some conflict. So it's not something that's ever going to disappear, but I like the word you use in terms of management, in terms of managing it. And I think it's something that, our leaders and persons within the workplace, from the bottom up and the top down, need to pay attention to make sure that you manage the good conflict in terms of you and might disagree on something. It doesn't mean that we're enemies, but we just need to get past that original hurdle and move forward to the end goal. So as you said, it's conflict management. The good ones, you want to manage it to make sure that the outcome is what is something that is productive, and the bad ones you want to nip in the bud and make sure it's something that you can weed out of your organization.
What role does effective communication play as it relates to conflict management?
It plays a major role, because at the core of everything that we do, we have to communicate. We are not mind readers as human beings. So we have to say what is on our mind, we have to say what we're feeling, we have to say what we're experiencing. It's the same thing in the workplace. If you don't communicate well, you can't manage your conflict well. So building those communication strategies into your workplace, into your customer service, as we talked about before, it's only going to strengthen at the core your organization.
Mr. Maile, oftentimes employees are a bit reluctant to report conflict to their superior because they're of the opinion that there's no proper investigation, nor decisions are being made based on facts, nor are decisions made based on facts. What can be done to curb this bad practice if this is the norm within organizations?
I think it's a case where, again, it comes down to your communication model that you have at play. Employees should have freedom to communicate things with all due, respect to their superiors, their supervisors, to their fellow colleagues as well. And if it's a case where it's something that needs to be reported anonymously, that is something that maybe HR should make provisions for within the organization. That someone could make a comment, you not know who it's coming from, but at the same time it is something that is actioned. So that even though it's an anonymous report that is received by HR, the manager, the supervisor, they can act on it based on the information received, so that at the end of the day, no one is being singled out as you are the person who reported the situation to HR, or you are the person who is responsible for the company being in this position as we speak right now.
Do you think the solution for conflict management from a leader's perspective is training and development? Because oftentimes when I hear about training and development, it's usually the line staff or probably the middle managers. But what about upper management?
Most definitely. I think when we're talking about training, any kind of training, it has to be throughout the entire organization. Because at the end of the day, we as human beings, we don't know everything. We could never know everything. We will never know everything. So you might come into an organization with certain preconceived notions as to how things should take place, but the organization might have a different culture to other organizations that you've worked in. And the only way for you to get that culture across might be through training and development. Because you would build your company ethos into your training modules, so that at the end of the day, if you're doing training on customer service, it's not just blanket customer service, but it's customer service as the way company X wants it to be customer service. So, and I think that's something that should be throughout the organization, most definitely at the top, because those are the persons who are setting pace for the organization. They're setting the goals, they're setting the mission, they're setting the vision. So those persons should have those key aspects of training and development that they refresh on a yearly, biannually, whatever the case is, so that they're staying current, so that they can stay on top of trends and pass those down to other persons in the organization as well.
Why do you think that training and development is usually one of the first things to be chopped from the budget?
I think it's a case where that's something that happens throughout the region, even internationally. And I think it's a case where in some organizations, people don't yet realize how important not just HR, but just training on a whole drives what takes place in the organization. So it might seem like fluff, like let's just cut it out of the budget. But then when you start having complaints about issues in the workplace, whether it's lack of customer service, whether it's lack of productivity, the first thing you're going to turn to fix those things is to maybe bring in a consultant, and on the back end, what they're going to say is there needs to be more training. So if you cut it on the front end, you're still going to do it on the back end anyway, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that will solve a lot of the problems in an organization.
It is usually evident that more emphasis is placed on the external customer. Do you think equal emphasis should be placed on the internal customer as well, in order to not only improve the level of efficiency within the organization, but to help the customer to have a better experience on a whole?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's a case where you definitely want to fix home first before you try to fix anywhere else. And from an HR perspective, as you're mentioning, internal customer, that's the person who sit next to you in the organization. That's the person that you pass every day in the corridor when you're going or coming to from lunch. You should have a good customer service relationship with them, in the sense that if you're talking between departments, between accounts and IT, it should be that I am making a request for something to get done and you follow up until my issue is solved, because we're in this together. We are both customers within the same organization. So if we have that good customer service relationship between departments, between employees, within the organization, think about how much that is going to shine on the outside, persons looking in and even persons calling in for assistance. You're going to be even more happy to help them, because you know if you need to get assistance from someone else within your organization, you have that support as well.
All right, Mr. Maile, we're going to take a break.
episode of the Apex of Training and Development Show was brought to you by the following sponsors.
We're back and we're at the exquisitely beautiful Ladder Restaurant, and I'm here with a very special guest, Mr. Shawn Maile, discussing customer service and conflict management in the work environment. Mr. Maile, before the break, you mentioned once your internal customers are happy,
Yes.
everything will function seamlessly. What are some of the far-reaching effects of promoting constructive conflict, team building, and customer service in the work environment?
That's a packed question, and I would say this. I think, like I mentioned before, good conflict is good conflict, right? And it can fuel a lot of creativity in the workplace. Because if you have a problem to be solved, then there's only one thing that you can do: solve the problem, right? And once people have, that effective communication aspect built into it as well, you know that it's easier for you to get things done. If we could have conversations, whether tense or terse, whatever the situation is, but then we could move past them quickly because we know at the end of the day, there's no ill intent, there's no malice. That makes it easier for us to dive into hard topics to solve for our organization, get the conflict out of the way, so to speak, and move on with the task at hand.
You spoke a lot about conflict between employers and employees, but what is the best way to resolve conflict between employees?
I think the best way is to attack it head on. You can't dance around the issues if they are there. And I think it's a case where everyone watching, would know that they could identify. You could probably identify right now many workplaces that you've just walked into and you can feel the tension in the air. Things like that are not good because it throws off the customer experience both externally and internally, and it throws off the image of the company as well. So if there exists some sort of conflict between co-workers in a space that you cohabit, it definitely has to be addressed. And if not, it's just going to continue to fester and feed out into the bigger organization. 5-10 years down the line, you have an issue and you don't really remember where it started, or the persons who it started between no longer work in the organization, but other persons came in and bought into it, and it just remains. So if you look at it as a tumor or something that is blocking progress, it just has to be removed.
But then what advice would you give to employees who are experiencing fear because of their other employees bullying them?
That is where I think HR comes in terms of making sure that there are policies in place in terms of reporting, so that a report can be made to HR, a supervisor or a manager, and be held in the strictest of confidentiality. And once you make that report, knowing it's confidential, and they start the process of looking into the report, not just taking wholesale what the person is saying, but doing their due diligence and making sure that at the end of the day, natural justice is served to all parties involved. I think that's what it really boils down to.
How can a supervisor identify the first stage of conflict, the latent stage of conflict? Because oftentimes when the conflict is known or observed, it's at the manifestation stage.
I think, like I said before, it's a case where you walk into a room and you can feel it, you can sense it.
But what if you don't sense
Right?
it?
Then it would be, I think, using your intuition, and I think just watching the patterns of how people interact with each other. If you notice that there is a process in play and persons always try to circumvent that process so that they don't have to have one-on-one direct conversations with certain employees, it's up to you as the manager, supervisor, to ask probing questions. Is there an issue here? And if so, what is it? Right? So that way you can address it head on. Again, it comes down to picking up on maybe the subtle cues and asking questions lightly just to figure out what is the issue at play, and getting some answers.
Very insightful. But we're going to pause for a break, and when we return, we'll continue on the discussion of conflict management and customer service in the work environment. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Apex of Training and Development show was brought to you by the following sponsors.
Thank you for staying tuned into the Apex of Training and Development. I am your host, Shawn Casimir, and I'm with Mr. Shawn Maile, Human Resource Specialist. Mr. Maile, explain how you would advise a leader who has a lot of conflict to deal with on a daily basis, but just don't know how to manage it.
Okay. I think the first thing I would say to them is to document what it is that they're witnessing in terms of making a list of the things that they're seeing happening in their organization. Because if you're going to engage someone, let's say a consultant in HR or a conflict resolution specialist or a mediator, whatever the case is, you have to have something tangible to show to them. You have to have a starting point to have that conversation. So if you document the behaviors, the trends, the patterns that you're seeing within your organization, I think that is a first step. I think the next step to do is to put a price tag to it, right? Because I think in a lot of cases, people don't fix things because they don't see how much money is being spent or is being wasted or is not being made from something. So if it's a case where there are policies that are not being carried out in the workplace because persons are not interacting with each other, are not sharing information as they should, as the manager, you have an opportunity to put a price to it, to say, every time these two departments don't work together or they get something wrong because there isn't information sharing, it costs the company X amount of dollars. And over the last 5 years, 10 years, or maybe the last year, whatever the case is, it has cost us X amount of dollars. So when you have those visuals that you could present to a consultant, if you're going to them to set a training up for persons within your organization, or even if you're taking it to the general team to say, this is something that I've noticed within our organization and this is something that we need to fix. Having those metrics to show them tangible things that say, it is costing us $10,000 every time there is a miscommunication between these departments because persons drop the ball in terms of making sure that communication is effective and I guess deferring to whatever conflict it is between the departments. This is how much it cost us. And this is why maybe at the end of the day, we can't do things like buy a new coffee machine for the lunchroom, or in terms of the points you get for your bonus. Showing them those tangible outcomes, I think, would go a long way in starting to repair that process of conflict management.
Do you think one of the main solutions to all of this is training and development?
Of course. And I like how you brought that back in at the end. Because at the end of the day, like I said, you might hire someone for their skill, but you train them based on the attitude that you want them to cultivate within the workplace, right? And the best way to do that is through training and development. But I think it all comes down to training and development at the end of the day.
Mr. Maile, it was a pleasure having you on the Apex of Training and Development. I think we'll have to invite you for a part 2 because the information was so insightful and intellectually stimulating, and I know that our audience took away a lot of information from this interview. All right, well, thank you once again. On behalf of the production team here at the Apex of Training and Development, we would like to thank you for tuning into yet another riveting episode and we look forward to having you on our next episode.
The Apex of Training and Development Show's motive has always been to give back to our community in the best way we can. Therefore, next week's Tip 10 will be dedicated to Community Charitable Ministry, who carry out various humanitarian efforts for persons in need.
The Bible teaches us in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17, "He that hath pity on the poor lendeth unto the Lord, and that which he hath given will he pay him again." In this proverb, God identifies with the poor. As our Creator, God values all of us, whether we are poor or rich. When we help the poor, we show honor both to the Creator and to His creation, and He accepts our help as if we had offered it directly to Him. God wants us to identify with the needy, not ignore them. CCM has chosen not to turn a blind eye. Even in this unprecedented season of COVID-19, CCM continues to serve the community. Our services include monthly food and clothing distributions, financial assistance, counseling and personal empowerment, and an annual back-to-school event for children. One of our greatest accomplishments was achieved through a partnership with Calvary Tabernacle Church in Hempstead, New York. Together, we assisted with the construction of a new home for a family on the island of Barbuda who had been displaced by Hurricane Irma. There are many in Antigua and Barbuda who need support financially, socially, and spiritually, and we believe that it is our responsibility to help our fellow citizens. All of our services are free, and we operate through fundraisers, donations, and volunteers. Most of our funds are generated from our annual fundraiser gala, which is usually held in December. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this event has been cancelled. CCM is making a difference in the lives of many in our community. Help us extend our reach. Please consider giving a gift of $100 to Community Charitable Ministry. Your support allows us to have access to flexible resources that can be used immediately to address our responsibilities and respond to needs as they arise. Donate by clicking the Zoop Online link at the end of this video. And please give generously. Thank you from CCM, and may God bless you in this season of giving.